Welcome to this week's episode of Review Ed. We're going to be talking to Adam Garry of Dell about their new education platform, one-to-one devices, tablets. Nice wide-ranging discussion with Adam, and always a pleasure to talk to him. We find out that McGraw-Hill actually agrees with Kirsten, and we'll find out why. Talk a little bit about the TED Ed new YouTube channel and what that means for video in general, and video and education, independent education. I talk about how I can possibly justify my new iPad purchase and see where Khan Academy falls into that. And we'll also talk a little bit about Britannica, the death of an era, or the beginning of a new one, or the confirmation of a new one, and a little bit about Luidia. Luidia has some new news coming out, a new study that they've done, very interesting stuff on building collaboration among our students and interactivity. And then finally, we talk a little bit about Critical Links, a company that is just starting to enter developed markets after spending maybe too long in developing markets, and see what they can possibly bring to us. So welcome, and thank you for joining us on Review Ed.
This is Review Ed episode 20, recorded March 16th, 2012. It's Friday. It's iPad Day. This episode of Review Ed is brought to you by StudyBlue, the mobile and online study service that helps students to learn their stuff for free. StudyBlue enables students to quickly share and compare their explanations with more than 1 million of their peers who are sharing over 40 million ideas. Anyone can test drive the database of explanations by visiting StudyBlue's homepage at studyblue.com. And by Transfluent, a rapid professional translation for Facebook, Twitter, and website. Transfluent offers 15,000 human translators, not machines, in 60 languages, available 24 hours a day to help you eliminate work and cost, creating new possibilities to connect with customers from abroad. Visit transfluent.com and follow at transfluent_en on Twitter. Welcome everyone. Review Ed episode 20. Yay. Little celebration. So after my brief absence, yes, this is indeed Kirsten Winkler. And with me, of course, my loyal co-host, Christopher Dawson. Thank you, Christopher, for doing this episode last week without at least the physical me. Of course, I was with you in spirit. But
Kate was there too.
Yeah, what I heard from the interview with Becky, that went well, and of course, thanks also to Kai for filling in, and I think as he is a techie just like you, the talk with Jason Perlow was very interesting and for him, and he enjoyed that a lot, and it's a good feeling somehow to realize that you are not necessary, or I am not necessary to make an episode, and that you did just fine without me. So that's good.
We did okay. It was you were missed, but we did okay.
Well, if you have questions from last week or about my blog post, we can do this episode. Let's see how that works. But of course, we have a lot of stories today. An interview with Adam Garry of Dell, and later on with Sun Kim of the Show Me app for iPad. We have the new, almost, Chris, we have to say, you almost have the new iPad. I'm sure it'll be delivered a little later today. And
too later today.
Oh, always too late. You're an addict somehow.
I know. You know what's funny is that the iPad 2 was a perfectly nice device, and the iPad 1 was a fine device, but I really much prefer my Android tablets, and I'm just not a big fan of iOS. I'm a Mac user. I like the Mac, but iOS just hasn't ever clicked for me the way that Android has. But I've got to say, I keep seeing bits and pieces with this Retina display, and that's my biggest thing. I really want to see what this display can do, and I've got some new software from Adobe that I want to fire up on there, and there's some great tablet optimized things, and There's interesting things to be had, and it's the latest from Apple, so I just can't help but get butterflies. So, we'll see.
And of course, we have an episode filled with video stories and, of course, tablet stories. So let's start with the first one. TED, the brand behind the very well-known TED Talks, very enlightening often as well. So they launched their TED Ed channel on YouTube, and they want to educate the world one video at a time, finding talented educators. We talked about this in previous episodes, not necessarily always having the skill set to produce great video that represents also in the optics represent the good content they produce or their curriculum provides. So identifying great educators and then giving them professional designers and video creators, editors at hand to produce high quality, great educational video. So, Chris, was it the world has been waiting for?
I don't know if I go that far. It's no Khan Academy, but I think that the TED series in general, you're right. There's a lot that can be gleaned, and they're a very wide-ranging bunch of topics that used to be sort of very tech-centric, and now they're really much more about the world in which we live. So, and you're also very right in that there's some amazing educators out there who simply don't have the technical savvy or know-how to further share what they're doing. And, we see this pretty frequently over at WizIQ, where you've got someone who is a brilliant instructor, but who's got a camera crew or a video production crew?
Sure,
not all of us have a guy to be able to handle this stuff.
The PowerPoints with the clip arts from the early 2000s, and there's definitely the gap between the idea, the educational content they want to bring to their students or audience, and on the other hand, unfortunately, though, a little bit, but we are definitely spoiled visually and getting more and more. And the younger you are, the probably the more you are used to high standards in visual and effects and so on. So I would definitely agree or make the statement that the overall experience suffers to some extent when you can't keep both somewhat balanced. So
right.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting though if we look at Khan Academy, there's nothing there that's technically incredibly savvy. It's just very well presented, very simply presented materials, and it's using a simple Wacom tablet. So I think that ultimately, as with all things educational, it does come back to the instructor. But if there are ways to, as you said, sort of balance this and have it be really accessible to other folks and really reusable in a way that's very acceptable, that's positive. So, I think that this is the move, regardless of whether it's TED or whomever. There's this move towards producing a lot of educational video that can be viewed on a lot of devices and used in a lot of ways. That's where I think the really important piece of this comes. So I think that it's the fact that teachers have repositories of information. Students have repositories of information they can seek out independently and use. That's probably more valuable than anything else. If this is the trend, right?
Yeah, I guess we also have to see what their focus is actually, whether they target the lifelong learners, as it seems. If we can imagine this also in a classroom environment, so somewhat in a more formal learning setting, I think pieces probably of the videos, but of course they, at least not up to now, would follow a curriculum or some more like formal settings. So, but yeah,
it's more resources, free resources. We never turn those away.
Yeah, that's it. So then we have a story on The Verge, doing a short interview with McGraw-Hill, and well, it seems to prove my feeling a little bit about the iPad 2, then compared with the new iPad, and I think undoubtedly Retina display is great. I heard what you talked about in last week's episode. So that McGraw-Hill, apparently they were one of the launch partners, the big launch partners for Apple just a few weeks back. And, well, he seems to be also more enthusiastic about the possibilities to use or make good use of the iPad 2, now also coming a little down in price with so being in the $300 to $400 price range, and I think ideally the interesting price margin would of course be between $200 and $300, but well, you get a little bit of an education discount, and then also making this for schools maybe a little bit more possible, feasible, or even more attractive to invest in, well, bigger purchases or purchases of bigger numbers of iPad 2s instead of the, well, iPad 3. I think you can go up to $800 somewhat dollars for one device.
Yeah, almost $900. It's $900. Yeah, which is pretty insane. You know, and even I bought the cheap one.
So the Wi-Fi or the wireless only for what is it then? As always, around the $500 price point or something.
Yeah, so $499 gets you, you know, just Wi-Fi only 16 gigs, and then everything else is the same. So that's one interesting thing about Apple's products. You know, they're adding on 4G or they're adding on other connectivity options, but they're not really changing the overall spec. Just maybe more local storage, which in this day and age is kind of irrelevant anyway. So you know, but I do think it's interesting, and you know, McGraw-Hill also echoed your statement that really that $200-300 mark is where things get really interesting, and Apple has yet to roll out that educational discount on either of these guys in their education store, but I think it'll happen, and we saw the same market differentiation happen when they had their white iBook or their white MacBooks, which were very, very successful, and kind of their resurgence back into the educational market, you know, fairly affordable, maybe not as affordable as other competing products, but when you have a large group of teachers who are very comfortable with Mac OS 10 and feel comfortable using it as an instructional tool in class, that has value as well. So even if they could get a bargain basement Acer for a lot less, or a Kindle Fire if we're talking in the tablet realm, if teachers are really comfortable with something, then that's going to be reflected in their teaching and their ability to lead students through a variety of activities. And I do think that one thing Apple brings to the table here that doesn't happen elsewhere is this extraordinary library of apps. Welcome, Adam. Thank you very much for being on Review Ed with us this week. And I just wanted to introduce Adam Garry of Dell. What is your actual official title with Dell?
Manager of Global Professional Learning and Strategy.
That's a good title. All right. Well, thank you. New next generation learning platform, but also, I mean, it is Friday. It is iPad Day. This is our theme today is tablets and e-readers as usual. That's in there, but we've also got just some talk of the platform and how things like e-readers and tablets and iPads can kind of fit into that. And we'd love to hear some about where Dell stands on all this. Love to hear your take on the education platform. We talked about it last week and we vlogged about it, but would love to hear any new latest and greatest developments that you're seeing on that front. So I'll just let you take it away. Tell us a little bit about yourself and where things stand.
Sure. Thanks, Chris. I'm a former educator, so I was an elementary school teacher for a while, and I was involved with school transformation that was really focused on project-based learning and student-centered. So that shift from teacher to student has been at the core of everything I've done in my career. And so when we start talking about all of these new devices and all of these different ways to access information, you start to think about how is a school either going to manage this or decide what is the right device, right? And that's really the question. So this week I was visiting with a couple of school districts on that very same question, and the tech department in some of those districts is saying, well, what do we do? Do we provide, like you said, e-readers and tablets and laptops? And I like to bring it back fundamentally to, well, what do you want learning to look like? And that's the conversation that I'm having with them. And when you dig down deep and you peel back the layers, you know that people really want it to be a personalized approach to learning. They want all kids to learn at their fullest potential and be able to master content and skills and show that mastery in a lot of different ways. Getting there is the hard part. So if you go back to the model of what is the right device to help them get there, part of that conversation, and it's a hard conversation to have, is, well, what do you supply, and then what do you let kids bring, right? And so what I always try to help districts think through the model of is, if you want learning to look a certain way, then then you should provide the right technology to support that learning model. And then you should open up the environment to let kids bring in other devices to support that as well. So, for example, the district I was working with was working on some STEM ideas and some new ideas around how to teach social studies. And they said over and over and over again to me, we want kids to produce. We want them to make videos. We want them to create their own content and create their own books. And they kept saying it over and over again. I said, so you're saying to me that you want kids to be producing just as much as they're consuming. This isn't, a 90% consumption environment. And they said, absolutely. And I said, well, then you have to think through the use case for the right devices for that. But when kids do consume in your schools, if they want to use phones and tablets and things like that, if they have them, let them bring them. Now, we did talk about also redefining equity in those environments as well, right? Because in a lot of school systems, they define equity as everyone gets the same thing.
Right.
So we talked a little bit about that notion of, hey, maybe in a K2 environment, a tablet is a great device for kids because they're learning to read, they're learning math, and repetition is great. And a lot of the apps right now are based on those types of things, right? So it makes sense in those environments, but we don't need to extend that out. Like netbooks was another example, right? Well, where do netbooks fit in? They're not going to be a great device for a high school kid. I'm sorry. We tried to make that happen, but it doesn't work. Kids need a lot more power when they get into high school if the model is designed for kids to produce, right? So to sum it all up, basically what I'm saying is that what I see right now is that based on the learning model, and if the learning model is to have kids, own some of that learning and be producers of information, then they're going to need a little bit more power than maybe a tablet and an e-reader is going to provide. And I don't think schools have the money, the budgets to provide all three of those things. So they have to be smart on where they invest and how they invest in technology.
So let's talk a little bit more about redefining equity. I like that term because it's key to all of this, and it's something we hear over and over and over again, that if you're going to bring your own device, how do you set sort of that lowest common denominator and ensure equity, but ensure that even the least expensive device that's there is doing what needs to be done. What's been your experience in that?
So the way that we've tried to help schools think through that model is outside of school, redefining equity is probably more about making sure that kids can get to the internet, that last mile conversation we've been having forever.
Right.
But inside of school, what we've said is, if you rethink your model and make sure that those kids that need a device to produce, and they can't bring it, but they can get it when they get to school and utilize it and even do checkout, right, at the end of school if they need it, then you got the right model in place to redefine equity. That's from a student standpoint. But even from a teacher standpoint, what we're saying is, why does the model always have to be every single teacher is going to do the same thing next year?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You know what you get, right? Why don't we think through the model and say, what does it take? What does a teacher profile look like for someone who's ready to do this? And let's get those teachers in and doing some great things, build capacity, and then build a model from there, because it's been my experience that almost all teachers want to do the right thing. They just have to be set up for success to do the right thing. That's how we're...
Yeah. And what feedback do you get from the teacher side? Having, on the one hand, either multiple devices, or then trying to figure out in the discussions with you which devices are best for the school to invest in, and then also on the teacher training side, I think they are all enthusiastic and realize that they need and also want to make something with technology, but it's often the question, to what extent, in a meaningful way, and do they feel comfortable enough to actually handle this, and not that they feel a little bit overwhelmed, or that their students might actually know more than they themselves do, and are not as familiar with technology yet as some of their students might be.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things in there. I don't know, do we lose Kirsten, or is she there?
Oh, we lost one. She's back.
Okay.
Good.
I think. There she is.
So, I mean, from the student point of view, once we do a bring your own device, the teacher has to know, and the acceptable use policy has to change to understand that, if a student device isn't working, that doesn't stop the flow of the learning environment. Then there has to be other ways for kids to know, okay, my device isn't working, I should join this group or pair with somebody else, right? And sometimes that's not perfect, because the kid is working on something that is a one-on-one type thing, so you have to rethink. But for the most part, we have to make sure that the management pieces are taken care of ahead of time when you move to an environment like that. From a teacher standpoint, the biggest part of this is going back and saying, okay, to the teacher, this is what learning is going to look like. A lot of times, like, I've worked in one-to-one for a long time, and what was always a breakdown was the folks at the district understood, but they never passed that down to the teachers and said, hey, here's a rubric or something that says this is what learning should look like. So the teachers were doing the best they could based on what they knew, not what the future state was going to be. So all the professional learning needs to be designed around what you want learning to look like, and it has to be an outcome-based professional learning scenario. So when we work with a school system, we actually build the capacity in folks, but it's through outcome-based scenarios. So that concept of professional development is great, but we understand that in school systems, sometimes you only have time for an experience. That's just something where you go, you learn something new, and you reflect. But what happens is, if we stop at experience and we call that professional development, the outcome can't be increases in student achievement. There's no process attached to it, right?
Right.
So that's the way we're supporting the move for teachers. If they say the model is personalized and blended, you got to do the right professional learning. And then you had a question in there about, when we're having the discussions about the actual product that they use, or whatever the device is going to be. I've said this over and over again. I can't wait for Dell to have a tablet so I can walk in and say, this is not the right device. That's the only reason why I want Dell. Not because I think that it's going to revolutionize what people are doing. Like I said earlier, I think K2, we can do some really exciting things, and I think, here and there it would be a good device for some kids, but to give every kid one and say this transforms teaching and learning, I think is the wrong way to look at it.
I think that's you said that very, very well. I mean, like I said, it's iPad day. So
did you check? Did you find something in your mail today, Chris, or not yet?
Not yet. No, not yet. But it is on the vehicle, ready for delivery. I did check that this morning, so I verified that.
You guys think I'll see anything about iPads in New York City today?
Nah,
nothing.
No, pretty unlikely. No, are you near an Apple store?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Right around the corner.
The lines are probably, you'll run through the lines on your way to your meetings this morning. But, I think that's something that it's very hard for people to get away from, because we do think of these tablets as these wonderfully, transformative devices, and it's one of those words that even I use too much. But really, it all comes back down to this same old system development lifecycle, assessing your requirements and all the fundamental IT basics that can get lost in the latest and greatest thing from whomever. Usually that happens to be something shiny from Apple, but even if Dell, for example, replaced the Streak and had this great new tablet, where does that fall into the ecosystem? And maybe in a couple of years, the technology will be there for something more tablet-y to really be it, or we'll have clamshell tablets, or there'll be something cool, I'm sure. But for right now, Intel has said this all along as well, that something that has the some of the functionality of a tablet is never a bad thing, but when it comes down to it, kids need to produce, and you need the software and the hardware all working together to make that happen. So,
yeah, I mean, and Chris, we've talked about this before. It's that concept of when you start looking at the models, it's really easy to replace the old model with the new model of textbooks.
Now we lost.
So you really have to rethink that model when you shift.
We lost you there for just the last couple of seconds, and you were about to say something totally profound. And you're there it comes. We'll edit this, but just real quick, you want to say what you were going to say about replacing the old model with the new technology?
Sure. I mean, my thought process on this is that the whole idea of the way we look at information today is based on a time of information scarcity. I mean, we package things a certain way because that was the only way to get the kids the information. And in a time of information overabundance, you don't have to package information the same way. We have to relook at how we organize information for kids to interact with it, right? And I believe that in that kind of environment, what happens is kids then get to choose the resources and learning objects that they want to help them master content, right? And teachers are supporting that kind of learning environment, but it doesn't have to be, here, read chapter 1 and answer the questions in the back, and now you've learned this, because we know that just doesn't happen.
Right. Adam, I think that was an excellent summary. Thank you very much, and I really appreciate taking some time early this morning to have a chat with us, and good luck making it through the crowds near the Apple Store.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. It was a good talk.
Thanks.
Thank you.
It was nice meeting you.
Transfluent.com also decided that it is worth for them supporting Review Ed. Maybe he also liked the talk with you. So,
hey, whatever works.
So for what Transfluent do you want to phrase it, Chris, or shall I?
Yeah. I mean, Transfluent actually does some really incredible near real-time translation, and it's almost like a paid commercial crowdsourcing of translation. It's a brilliant idea. They have a worldwide network of translators, and you can submit items and things that you need translated to them, and they can leverage this network and have things spit back to you from native speakers very, very quickly. And we all use Google Translate, we all use translation tools, and they're fine, but they give you literal
it gives
translations.
I would say all the machine translation, and it definitely gets better. You get a certain idea, and probably Transfluent, as the service is not for free, and they want to make a little bit of money, and they have to pay the translators.
Right.
It's probably mostly for a corporate context, but I think for companies it is important, as they all have at least a website that is being updated, and they want to announce new things, but now they are also all, almost everybody and every company is on Twitter and Facebook, and of course you have, with internationalization, you have an international audience, and I can very well imagine that I sometimes not only want to make my announcement in English, the language we all speak to at least some extent, but to make it maybe more personal and more local in then translating into the language of your target audience.
Especially from the point of view of a native speaker. I mean, they're doing it kind of unofficially for Barack Obama for his on his Twitter feed, but they're translating to Spanish, and that's so as Obama or his campaign tweets something out, well, within a very short period of time, now all of a sudden it's out there in a Spanish feed, and that's a pretty powerful thing in a country where we have a huge Spanish immigrant population, and we know that they're going to be swing voters in the upcoming election. So even though Barack Obama has not adopted this officially, this idea that this sort of translation can happen in so close to real time and happen from a native speaker perspective, that's the kind of thing that a business could really eat up, and to be able to engage on all these social channels and have native speakers handle the translation for you very quickly. You can't keep up a conversation if you have to, one, not only lose things in translation and have these awful sort of machine translations, but also not be able to do them quickly and in near real time. So that's where Transfluent comes in, and what a great idea. So, of course, speaking from the point of view of someone who works for a company based in India, and I see lots of things get lost in translation. A lot.
Oh, yeah.
So, it's, no matter how good, how well our employees speak English, it's not American English. And, to have people, be able to handle those nuances, it takes a native speaker to do that, and, or Watson, but I don't have access to Watson, so.
Oh, then maybe with IQ wants to have a look.
Don't, trust me, they're on our list, definitely.
So we thank them, or we thank both our sponsors, Study Blue and Transfluent, for their support of Review Ed this week. And so Apple keeps promise. They promised to deliver today on the 16th, and the new iPad came. It looks very nice and shiny, very similar to iPad 2, I have to say. So I think between 1 and 2, you had a much bigger difference than 2 and the new one now.
Right, right. I actually have an iPad 2
yeah, I have
here.
Yeah.
And I just about dropped my new iPad, but I caught it. So this one came from Adobe. They want me to look at some things they've done with their new digital publishing suite, which is actually very cool stuff. But we can see there's the black, but I mean they're the same.
Yeah,
so,
because I have the white one, so iPad 2 in white, and at least of course I'm not right beside you, but it looks very, very similar to the previous version. But
they're one and the same. I think when the place you see it is it's just in the startup screens now, but the minute you turn it on, there is
there you see it, yeah.
There is some definition there. And it's funny. My oldest son just got himself he inherited my iPad and my iPad 2, and he's actually. He had a big projector in his room, and the whole geek kids entertainment thing. But he started just watching TV or episodes or whatever entertainment stuff on his iPad because one, it's right next to him, and two, the resolution was really just fine on the iPad 2 as well.
I also consume media. I watch TV or other webcasts and so on, and you are right. When you only know iPad 2, and of course we talked a little bit about connection speed and so on. So I think if you only know iPad 2, it's maybe not perfectly fine, but it's very okay. So I think I would be the same like you. As soon as you start the screen and you see Retina display, and undoubtedly from the first comments of other tech bloggers who, of course, who bought it, it's the best screen we have ever seen, or we have seen so far. And as you pointed out in our talk before, better resolution than on an HD TV. So
right.
on a 10-inch device, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, I think the proof will be in the pudding. One, it's a bit of a chicken and egg issue, right? I mean, we have to get people to develop apps that are optimized for it, and even Adobe. I mentioned that they sent me over an iPad too, and they want me to give one away, and but they sent it over so I could to look at the digital content that they've created and have in this digital publishing suite, which they're marketing pretty heavily to schools. Kind of, I think as an expensive but pretty cool alternative to iBooks Author, because it is far more open in its output. Even they haven't fully optimized yet for the new display. Given how many of these, though, that Apple has already sold, I think we're going to see a real drive to optimize. As Jason Perlow pointed out last week, though, that's bandwidth, a lot of bandwidth, and for people who, like Jason, have a 100 megabit per second connection to the internet, because they live somewhere where they can, that's a non-issue. For the average school with, 30, 40, 100 of these guys, 200, a one-to-one program, there's just no way that's
you have to be in one of the tech hotspots and where you simply have the big pipes available, and then I think, and we will certainly see very soon the first app developers or also web developers developing now really optimized for iPad 3. And on the one hand, for the people who have access to this high-speed internet, it will be a very nice, undoubtedly a great experience. On the other hand, yes, you have the many other people, and even here having made a choice where I want to live. Even if I wanted to pay more for the connection, it's simply not possible. So this is the fastest connection available at the moment. So you had to rent another place simply just for internet connection and for the use of the new iPad. So and I think with all the great things to come, I think I'm going to write a post maybe later today or this weekend that this could, of course, also screw a good part of the internet, or at least give a lot of people. I remember some years back when it was all about Flash, and developers built those huge Flash sites, and you had those cycles and enormous times until a web page loaded. So it could be the same, essentially, if you want to have the maximum experience with iPad 3, but not the pipes for it, almost the same.
Well, this also points as well to why this has probably more applications in higher education, where you're on campus, you're going to have access to, most likely, a direct line to the web, and you're going to have far greater bandwidth available to you at most universities. So there we can see some applications. I obviously I'll be playing with this probably too much this weekend instead of doing real work. But I think we'll get a sense pretty quickly. I have a relatively fast connection at home. But like you at the house I'm about to move back to, I've done the same thing. I've chosen to live in the country, and our schools are in exactly the same situation. We're lucky to have maybe some aggregated DSL lines, and that's about it. So, all of a sudden, here comes the same digital divide we've talked about for how many years now, the tech haves and have-nots. It's going to be an issue. It's not like I could have bought a 4G model of Ether and get 4G out here. It's just doesn't exist. Yeah. So we'll see. But I actually read a stat the other day. Half the traffic on the internet is malware. It's junk. It's spam. It's nonsense. And for schools especially, if they're looking even at any one-to-one program or a very widespread deployment, let alone a deployment of iPad 3s, they're going to need to do whatever they have to really keep that traffic to be exactly what it needs to be. And that adds overhead to your traffic as well as you're scanning and doing what you need to do. But it is going to become far more important to manage and shape bandwidth, I think, than it will be to worry about access. And schools have been moving towards this for a long time anyway. But being able to, even on college campuses, keeping the torrents limited to very little, or just really trying to think about how bandwidth gets used and how it can be prioritized for actual research purposes. These are all really key things.
And as you said, for students in higher ed, med school, people like that, of course, having high-resolution animated graphics, I could very well imagine this being such a nice experience on the new iPad, and so therefore we can justify. And of course, what you wrote over at ZDNet and also The Verge, so the Khan Academy iPad app is available now on the App Store for free. And not that Khan produces particularly tech-intense videos. I think essentially what he uses is a graphic tablet and then simply writes with the pen on it. But I think works fine on the iPad 2 as well.
Well, I think that's interesting though, because I wrote a bit tongue-in-cheek, justifying the iPad 3. Really, I think what it does is justify tablets. And in particular an iPad, since it's an iPad app, it makes a real case for adopting technology like this. And when we talked with Adam Garry earlier about the issue of tablets and older students being media creators as well as media consumers. Yeah. He's 100% correct, but to be able to provide a study guide and even just access to the web in a really sort of handheld and portable way, and allowing all the micro-mobility that students experience or should experience, I think this goes back to your point that iPad 2 does just fine. It's at a price point that is achievable, and you have access to the entire 2,700 videos now in the Khan Academy library. That's a lot of content.
That's a lot of content, and with all sometimes also justified criticism, but having this as a free resource, and of course, I'm sure that also on Wikipedia you can, probably very, very rarely, but you can sometimes also find something which is not optimal, and therefore, of course, yes, Khan Academy videos have some flaws, but I think
that they're free.
They are free. They are a great experience, and I think you can still learn a ton of things. Yes, when you are a subject matter expert, you may sometimes find something. However, I think for the average person to brush up their knowledge, or even above that, it's still a very good, profound resource, and I enjoy watching Khan Academy videos.
I do too. I'm a math teacher, and we've talked about this before. The idea that most teachers in general, math teachers in particular, have a very different way of thinking and learning than 90% of their students. To be able to say, hey, kids, if you didn't get the lecture today, if you have any questions, tonight, go home, watch this video, let's talk about it in the morning. Take the not even a full-on flipped classroom approach, but let's get a different approach to learning something. And I found MIT OpenCourseWare, some of their very introductory materials. There's a couple amazing undergrad lecturers at MIT who do a far better job of explaining some advanced physics concepts, at least advanced to the average high school student, than I ever could. Because it's a different way of explaining, a different way of demonstrating. Khan offers the same thing, and whether you love it or find the occasional niggle, overall it's a different way of explaining things than most teachers use, and because Khan is coming at this from a different perspective than teachers. So honestly, $400. If you're looking at the iPad 2, that's not if you buy it just for Khan Academy alone, there's a lot to be said.
It's an investment in your future and in your.
That's right.
Yeah. And it will be interesting to see download numbers. I mean, the app is free. That's of course a big plus point, or everything of Khan Academy is. But I would like to see some numbers in maybe 2 weeks or in a month, how often the application will have been downloaded. So I suppose many times.
I'd expect so. I'll be surprised if it's not, the numbers aren't kind of through the roof, because, well, I mean, it's free, and free apps tend to get decent play anyway, but we've got a whole lot of attention being focused right now on the iPad, for better or for worse. And it was a smart marketing move to release there and not necessarily elsewhere. Makes sense.
Makes total sense. So we had a little story this week about students not asking on the one hand, their parents, nor even further away, almost impossible to ask their teachers if they have a question or if they want help with something. But as I'm not that surprised by it, they ask Google or other search engines and rely on the result they get over there. I'm maybe a little bit more surprised about the numbers or about the clear statement that no, it doesn't. It is not in, we can say, almost any way attractive to us to ask our parents, because we are not sure that they know more. They know sufficiently enough to answer our questions, and we don't feel supported by our teachers that we would want to ask them or to go to them and ask them our questions.
I as a math teacher, high school math teacher, I can say that the vast majority of parents it's not that they're stupid or whatever. It's that, one, we do take a different approach to math education now, and two, people tend to be scared of math, and 20, 30 years ago, math was hard, and it wasn't as necessary. There wasn't the emphasis on it in schools unless you were headed for a STEM field. We didn't even have the term STEM then. So, the perception among students that perhaps their parents don't know as much as they need to is probably not a bad one through no real fault of their own. I mean, this is I've advocated for a long time the idea that instead of having a parents' night that only your best students' parents attend invariably, but you really need our math nights, which you need our ongoing parent development or parent learning programs to make sure that they're totally up to speed. And it's a pretty critical issue, because when I had problems with math, I'd go to my dad, and he had a master's degree in math, so I could get a pretty good answer. It was a long answer, a painful answer, but I got it. And most students don't have that. And I think even now, as we're looking at the younger levels, very sort of experiential ways of learning math, which I think have a huge amount of value, but it looks very, very different to a parent. And in fact, it can be destructive for the parent to try and explain the old ways when we need to get students to wrap their heads around concepts as opposed to around algorithms. So, I think I can't say I'm surprised by these results either. I think it's unfortunate, but I can't say I'm surprised.
And I'm not surprised that they feel no encouragement from the teacher side. I think this is probably a little bit too plain, and I know that of course they are the good teachers who want to support their students and everything, probably more than the bad ones. But I remember very well, so being shortly before the A-levels in Germany, and our math teacher always told us, I cannot do the same problems with you I did with students like 5 or 10 years ago. Students only get more stupid and lazier and whatnot. So you didn't feel particularly encouraged to, when you really had a question, to go to this man and to actually have another talk and maybe talk it over and just admit that you maybe weren't able to follow his explanations or his course in class then to a perfect extent or to 100%. And this was a little bit sad. So internet wasn't really there. So you either had to ask your peers, your parents, or to figure it out with your book alone. And I'm pretty happy for today's students that they have the possibility to not only use the internet in order to use Facebook, but to also get help and problem solving.
That's true, but I think the other thing that we have to think about is even now we have teachers who are frustrated. You should know this already. Why don't you know this? Why are we having to remediate? If we look, there's only a few sort of model schools or school districts that really are integrating their curriculum and are mapping out their curriculum from K to 12. And those schools find, by the time someone hits the 9th grade, well, they have a core set of skills, and there's this common denominator where, no pun intended, where you can know that your students will know a particular set of skills or a particular set of concepts. And now as it stands, if we have kids funneling into a middle school from 5 different elementary schools, and all 5 elementary schools took a different approach without any sort of coordination or unification, it is frustrating for teachers. And of course, the answer should be to remediate and then unify your curriculum, but that doesn't always happen. So again, it's pointing to the Common Core and these core standards, teaching to the standards, and teaching in an outcomes-based way. Your students don't leave the 4th grade until they have a set of skills that are equivalent or that are agreed upon for 4th graders. They have to meet those outcomes, and that's a story in and of itself. So.
Little trivia from France. Just read that on TechCrunch this morning that in France they are discussing a planned tax for Amazon to support small bookstores, so small independent bookstores. Every purchase you make on Amazon has to pay a certain amount, and it will be invested to support those local independent small bookstores.
Only in France.
Very French, I have to say. I mean, there's a couple of reasons. Of course, we are like the US in an election year, and the current president wants to be re-elected. He also talked about tech giants making money in France but not paying their taxes in France. So he's thinking about a lot of taxes for tech companies, or let's say at least big tech companies. And I mean, we cannot deny we are in an economic crisis here in France as well, and I think the state, the government is looking, actively looking, where there might be some tax money one or the other way could be made. And some tech companies like Apple, Amazon, Google, of course, showing brilliant numbers, big profits. So so that's what they are thinking about, and also it's a little bit, I would say, living here but not being French. It's a little bit the French mindset also to, on the one hand, preserve their culture and identity, but on the other hand, I see them neglect historic property. So it's a little bit weird sometimes in France what they want to preserve, and it shouldn't change, like reading books made of paper, and not switching to apps, ebooks, audiobooks, whatsoever. And but maybe there are a significant number of voters for Mr. Sarkozy. So so maybe that's that. I think a couple of reasons, and but pretty friendly.
Well, we see a backlash here in the States as well against, we tend to single out Walmart more here than anything else, but it's the big the big corporate giants versus the small mom and pops. And I hear all the time this country was built on these small businesses and the middle class. And I mean, it's like you said, it's an election year, and we hear lots of ways to support small businesses, yada yada. When it comes down to it, though, when we can meet our needs less expensively elsewhere, it's hard to justify. I think there's a bit more of a free market mindset here as well. So I think but there's still this notion that in some ways smaller is better, and sometimes it is. But there were
if you can
long
allow
lines
yourself to pay the bigger price, as I think when everybody is somewhat in a good situation, it is much easier for people to say, yeah, I want to support this, and I pay $5 more or even 10, and I get some consulting, the opinion of the shop owner, and so on. If you are on budget constraints, as many families are here, and well, it's usually they want their house and need a car and children, so on. So we will see how much or how many of these planned rules or regulations will actually be implemented, and then before election or after the election, and so on. I think there's a lot of political talk going on as well, but yeah, France, as you said, to some extent still has this of being a social state or social system, country governance. So it's a little bit maybe different than the perfect capitalist mindset of an American, but yeah.
Well, that's changing too. It's easy to be a capitalist when things are going well, but that's the whole Occupy movement here too. So again,
and in France, you can be very doing very well, let's say, to avoid the word rich, and you can still be a socialist. So there's no contrast here as well, which is always a little bit funny.
That is.
Okay.
That's but speaking of books, I mean, you wrote an article on Britannica and the end of an era as they stopped their print version. I'm writing one up too, just my own sort of take. I mean, I think for me it's this kind of Wikipedia versus encyclopedias versus primary sources, real research methods kind of issue, and I've always struggled with the idea of whatever this sort of central aggregated source of information might be, and it's when things become outdated and things become they're big blocks of dead trees.
Yeah. And I think Encyclopedia Britannica, they are not doing bad, actually. For them, it seems to be a maybe even good business decision. So, of course, you can say after 244 years, they have had quite a track record. But on the other hand, as you said, those big piles of dead wood are costly. They have to be developed, written, then sold, and I think I have read or heard that the printed version for the last couple of years has only made 10% of their income. And then, yes, of course, you have Wikipedia. What they seem to do pretty well is make this premium. So, yes, we know and we have realized that there is a good place for Wikipedia on the internet. We are convinced, or as we can all see, the concept works. If you want more, and you want really apparently premium research, this is what we can provide. And then you pay for an application or so on. So, yeah.
I think it's a very reasonable approach. I think what we tend not to teach our students anymore, though, when we'd all go do research in an encyclopedia, that was a starting point. You grab the Britannica or the World Book or whatever, and you figure out what you're talking about, and you get some general information, and then you use the works cited to dig in further. And I think a lot of people tend to miss the fact that Wikipedia does a nice job of flagging articles that don't have primary sources, and those that do, they're easily linked out, and there's lots more reading to do. Wikipedia doesn't need to be the be-all to end-all, just as Britannica was never the be-all to end-all, and it wasn't supposed to be. It's just a matter of kind of shifting our expectations. But having a premium version of Wikipedia or whatever is a very valuable thing. You see people subscribing, school subscribing. It's certainly a lot easier to view it on your iPad than super high resolution, of course, than it is taking up shelves. And I had someone on Twitter ask me what they should do with those new empty shelves they're going to have. I said fill them with iPads.
I think even it might not be the newest version, it somehow tells that you are still a cultivated person, educated person. It's simply nice to have it on your shelf. It doesn't mean that you still regularly use it when it's so easy to type in a search and then get probably as good, if not better, results. But Britannica, they seem to be fine with their decision, and they didn't get backlash or so, but a lot of people said, how can this be? Well, if all those people had bought the encyclopedia before, they would have most likely continued producing it. So
exactly.
I think from a business point of view, it was the right decision to take at that point. And if they are fine with that, well, we have to deal with it and just have to accept that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it makes good sense. So that's interesting, though. It's maybe the death of an era, but certainly an acknowledgement of a very new era, and not necessarily a bad one either. My wife would say it's a bad one, but she hates this sort of stuff. So.
Yeah. I don't want to start this, but of course, a little bit it's a generational thing.
It is. That's not a bad statement to make. I think that it's simply a matter that educators do have to realize that there is a generation gap. Perhaps we talked about a generation gap for years in a very different sense, and I think that perhaps the generation gap is even more profound now because it has such a great effect on ultimately employability and the way that we live our lives and do our jobs. So I think that makes sense. So speaking of various switches and changes, Luidia, who makes actually some very cool interactive whiteboard products, and they started actually as a conferencing company, partnering with some big optical companies. They actually did
some nice coverage and put the word out there. I think, was it last year or was it already in 2010? Time moves so quickly, but I think they were pretty present even on, let's say, more general tech blogs, and I have always thought that they built a nice thing, a nice device there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, Robert Scoble, I think it was 2010 when he, the end of 2010, when he did a presentation using an e-beam. And, I have one sitting beside me up on the wall that I project onto and use for webinars and webcasts. And, the idea, of course, being that they're modular and you can transport them and share them among teachers. And, Mimeo tried to do this a while ago, and actually they have some new technologies now that are much nicer. But when Mimeo first introduced this sort of portable interactive whiteboard, it was not so awesome. I think they've come a long ways. But, Luidia's done a nice job of what they did as well. And, as I mentioned on CDNet, the study has to be taken with several grains of salt. But they did a study and some research among educators, K-12 educators, really looking at adoption. And they were able to find that, yes, none of us have any money. Okay, so we need to be a little more creative about how we roll out technology and make use of it. And I think that's, that's a fine statement to make. But what they also found, which was, I think, more interesting, is that teachers are really driven, many teachers are really driven to actually adopt this technology because they believe that it has a lot of value for their students. Mm-hmm. And, what schools need to be thinking about doing is buying the right bits of technology, which, of course, as we read in the conclusion of the study, Luidia technologies certainly are that right bit of technology. But, they need to be, of course. But, I think they're probably kind of right. Buying things that are modular, that are easily shared, and that aren't shared in a really difficult sort of way. I mean, when you have one computer lab in a building, that's hard to share. When you have, several these little e-beams that you can pop onto your wall and hook up to the laptop that's in your room, and you have sort of a reasonable baseline of technology, well, this allows you to make phased rollouts and things that aren't necessarily
something. And I would suppose definitely for the good part of the teachers that they feel more comfortable, more easily using a Luidia e-beam than being bombarded with bring your own device, you have this smartphone, he has that tablet, and I have to manage everybody and make sure that everybody has a great experience. Now we have to, and we want to use technology in the classroom. So I think it's a good hybrid of combining traditional with some technology and enhance the experience, definitely.
Right. And just got to think of the teachers behind it and do the right professional development with it, but it sounds as though that's happening more than it used to, which is good. The other thing, I actually just got off the phone with them before we started this webcast. They have an announcement. It's embargo's lifting on Monday, so by the time folks see this webcast, it should be up. They are bringing into beta mobile, not necessarily mobile, a web-based collaboration platform, which can interact with their e-beams or can be used from any web-based device. They're preferring that it be tablet-sized or bigger. And then there's basically virtual whiteboards, shared whiteboards, and multiple shared whiteboards that a class can use, that students can use, that they can use. They can even leave their whiteboard, for example, from the day with all the notes from the day up and active for the night, so students can view them later on. It's actually it's very cool. It's all web-based, so we're not they're
taking the step by step, going a little bit further, exploring what technology or what next step makes sense to combine with the e-beam. Mm-hmm.
Exactly, yeah, and so we're seeing that students have if you are in a BYOD sort of setting, well, the teachers have less to worry about in terms of managing that. They simply need web access, and that certainly brings down this common denominator we've been talking about for schools looking at one-to-one or looking at bring your own device. It's not necessary for people to have the iPad 3 or the new iPad. As long as they can get online, they can interact and they can interact with each other, with the teachers. They can see what they missed for a day. They can interact while they're on a field trip in different locations. So actually, again, some very interesting technology and very interesting implementations that don't have a very high cost associated with them, and they can be rolled out as appropriate and as a school sees fit. So I certainly think they're headed in the right direction. But I'll be downloading their apps and they're using their various software this weekend on the new iPad because
on the new iPad. So you have the both extremes, the fast forward technology. Piece
I promised them I'd give them feedback from the new iPad with their new web browser, web stuff. So I'm just doing my part. Have to have it.
And of course, you can visit our sponsor for this week also using the iPad. So you talked with her last week. So Christopher made an interview with Becky Split of Study Blue as they announced a new version or new features of Study Blue. And we are very happy to have them as one of our sponsors for this week on Review Ed. And what Study Blue essentially do, they focus less on the teacher side, as Becky explained, but a lot of the peer-to-peer and student-to-student interaction, and it seems to work pretty well. That this recommendation from one student to the next one or to your peers works definitely for them. And well, what Study Blue is that you have a flashcard system to learn, so you can use other people's flashcards or set up your own or create your own sets, but also study guides. And I think from the iPad, from a normal desktop device, I think it's a great way to cover like one aspect of learning. And maybe I think in your talk you were pretty positively interested in what they do. Did you have a look over?
I did. Yeah. After we talked, of course, I had to go look it up and do some more playing with it. And I think one of the stories that she shared when we talked was that she went to a restaurant and they were eating in the restaurant and they had to simply memorize menus. The wait staff had to memorize menus, and they were using this tool for memorization purposes. And it's a very broadly applicable tool for students who are self-motivated to create their own study tools. And it's among the few holy grails for students to be able to exploit their self-motivation and make use of these things, and also to be learning from and through each other and comparing and sharing resources, completely independent, in fact, of parents and teachers pushing on them. They're able to just do this and use it, and they're able to use it throughout various aspects of their lives, whether they're learning French verbs or they're learning the menu at the restaurant where they have a part-time job. This I think is indicative of kind of the new face of learning. This ability to gain skills, do things independently, seek out information independently, and then do something about it. So it's a platform. We keep talking about this idea of platform. Mm-hmm. What a great idea to have a platform where students can kind of independently manage some of their learning. So yeah, I was really impressed. Actually, I ran it up for ZD Next. I have some screenshots and things that I wanted to share there as well. It's a really useful tool.
So it helped you with your own research already. You have an article. We are, of course, very happy that they decided to become a sponsor.
That's not why I'm reading the article.
No. That's also not why we made the interview with Becky, but because we think it's a really good and helpful tool, as you said. Very important to not only have teachers who assign something to students, but motivate students to start creating and start learning as part of a self-motivated process. And if Study Blue sort of found the key to do so, that's of course very good for them, and I think what other people have also tried and maybe not succeeded to the highest degree. So
not certainly not to the extent that the Study Blue has. They have, I think, they're hitting upon the secret sauce a little bit. This is not something that is necessarily easy to just put together and have work. So I think
they are taking their time to not push out update by update, but I know them, or I have known them for at least I think more than 2 years now, taking this as a step-by-step process, and now they have sort of figured out the basics. They can go a little bit more quickly, but they definitely took time at the beginning to figure out what they really want to focus on, and I think that's part of it, focusing on the students because that works for them, and not generally everybody, institutions, individual teachers and students, but it's one of the few products, at least in that space, let's say, where they really focus on the student side of things.
Yeah, and she was really quite adamant about that's they're 100% focused on student, and it shows in their product because it is very student centric. So good stuff.
Oh. So thank you
Of course.
for supporting us, and Chris had his story to share as well, which always makes me happy when you try out products or companies we speak with and you didn't know before, and you actually really like their products.
Yeah, it's good to like your sponsors' products.
That's actually a thing. I think I can share this with our audience, that we only accept sponsors we are happy with, and we have a certain relationship before, so at least we know their product and we talk with them, and not to simply go too broad and just for the sake of having sponsors, which is of course important for us, but it's not everything. So
also credibility, know, and believing in the people that we support.
I think so. Yeah, so that we really like the products and believe in the potential of the products. And
exactly.
Yeah, good. You have one more story for us.
Yeah, this is just a quickie, but it's a company called Critical Links. They actually do primarily security appliances and firewalls, but they partnered with Intel a few years back as part of their learning series and created this education appliance, which really I actually have one sitting on my desk. It's getting ready to get fired back up because there's some cool stuff there, but it's meant to be a turnkey, plop this into a school sort of solution. Mm-hmm. And it provides everything from wiki and web platforms, all the way up to device management. And although it works very nicely with the Intel Learning Series ecosystem, and is really kind of meant to be part of that, it can stand alone quite nicely too. It's been promoted for years now as a solution for developing countries that may not have infrastructure in place. However, the news this week is that it's now E-rate eligible. So folks in the States, I'm sure, are all too familiar with E-rate. So, yeah, but basically it's a federal program here in the States that is funded actually by our phone bills and some taxation that allows for schools to get reimbursed for some pretty significant infrastructure kind of expenses. Some of these sorts of things are often not covered unless they're bundled with other services like servers and firewalls, things of that nature. It's really more about internet connectivity. So the fact that this is now eligible for E-rate is acknowledging that these platforms, that these tools are actually a necessary part of infrastructure, and this allows Critical Links, I think, to make some inroads here in the States. When I first saw the appliance, I said, hey, these little rural schools like the ones I teach in could really use these. This would be great. And they said, well, it's really for the schools that are, in developing countries, and that's what we're targeting. I said, well, you know what? Rural schools in the United States, or small schools, or inner city schools that lack resources, they're in the same boat as the developing countries. So I'm thrilled to come in.
That's exactly the feeling I have with one laptop per child in not so few of their aspects, that I think for a company it is of course well thought through when they have a certain target and they really focus on that, at least at the beginning. But as we can see, and I entirely agree with you, that in at least a period of, how to phrase it, once again, economic downturn or economically challenged at the moment, that many schools and many parts of the education system are not that different as they face pretty much the same challenges as developing countries. So why not offer these solutions in our first world countries as well? And what school wouldn't want a budget-friendly solution? And I have the same feeling that I'm a little bit anti this, oh, that's a solution not for you. No, that's not for you, that's for the developing countries. So
right. We face a lot of the same challenges, and we don't like to acknowledge that, but to actually, I'm seeing, particularly the work I do with colleagues in India and some new colleagues we have in China, I'm starting to feel like there's a pretty big digital divide here between where we stand and a number of schools in these so-called developing countries. There's some great solutions out there, and I have to say the critical link solution in particular, I've followed them for a while, and it's just a nice turnkey solution. It works well, it works easily, and especially when we see, even if there aren't necessarily the budgetary constraints, there's very often the technical constraints. We don't always...
as we talked about bandwidth and all of that before,
Yeah, and then even the kind of technical savvy of teachers who are trying to work on this stuff. So very good. Yeah,
very good.
Congratulations, critical.
And that brings us to wrapping up our stories for today. Yeah, Chris, what are you up to? We talked about the new story, new article on ZDNet. Something more or some more?
Yeah, well, definitely sort of an iPad education wrap-up. There's a number of apps that I want to test, and, it'll be a weekend of playing. So there'll definitely be that piece. But also, I'll be talking in a little more detail about critical links, and I'll be writing that up on EDUKWEST. And then we have writing some more up on really hands-on time with the stuff coming out of Luidia, their collaboration tool now. I think that's perhaps even more interesting than some of their hardware. So talking about this idea of, how do we enable, kind of micro-collaboration. It doesn't have to be, schools or students or teachers across time zones. It can be in the same classroom. How are we doing collaboration? So I think that's what I'll be talking about this weekend and into next week. How about you? What do you have on tap?
Let's see. So I would say people can, of course, visit the kirstenwinkler.com blog. There we talked about my news story about the student survey not asking parents and teachers for help anymore. This is on my blog for Big Think. So if you go on bigthink.com and then search for Disrupt Education, you can find all my articles from 2011 and this year as well. Otherwise, I would say, you find me on Twitter on both handles at Kirsten Winkler and at EDUKWEST. And Chris, thank you for after a few months telling me that it's not that people should tweet at Mr. D at a high school HS. So I always thought of data and whatever, and now I got so used to saying Mr. Data HS. I thought it was somewhat easier, but thanks for finally
revealing
this riddle. Yeah, so it's Mr. D at AHS.
That's right.
Good.
Right, so be sure to check out that my big reveal there. So very good. It was, as always, a pleasure.
As always, great.